Come on, catch it, catch. I hate this game. Well, that didn't go so well, but thanks for tuning in to Kolb's Connections, your one-stop shop for AP Gov. Today's lesson, Federalism, Episode 3.
You will be popular. You're gonna be popular. You're gonna be popular. You're gonna be popular. You're gonna be popular.
Okay, so you wanna be popular, but I just gotta ask, what's stopping you? And what's the dream? Are you trying to make it big, or you trying to get rich, or just trying to make a hit? Well,
as we saw in our previous lesson, there are some huge problems when we have too strong a central government. We saw those under Great Britain. But there are also just as many problems when there's a footloose and fancy-free mentality and the states get to decide everything. We saw that under the Articles of Confederation. So today what we're going to do is we're going to look at specific provisions in the Constitution that hopefully bridge the gap and take the good of each system but leave out the bad. So what we're going to first look at is what actual provisions in the Constitution give us central authority. And then we're going to look at what provisions in the Constitution give us our state authority. And we're going to see that it's the melding and combining of these that make federalism the great thing that it is. So first off, looking at the Constitution, what do we see that moves us to strong central government? What do we see that moves us away from the Articles? So a strong central government. First off, we see the preamble of the Constitution. What does it state? It says that we, the people of the United States. Right off the bat, we see the word United States. This idea that we're not just free-for-all states that do what we want, but we're united. That shows a strong central government. If we contrast the Articles of Confederation opening line, which says, we, the undersigned delegates of the states. Clearly, we see that the founders under the Articles of Confederation thought that they were just sent each by their own states. Rather, with the Constitution, we have this united front. Again, this strong central government. Well, let's keep looking at other parts of our Constitution that show this need for a strong central government. First off, we see the expressed powers given to each branch. We see that Congress has the expressed power to raise a military, something that was lacking in the Articles of Confederation. Congress has the expressed power to tax, something that was lacking in the Articles of Confederation. The President has the expressed power as commander-in-chief of the strongest military in the world, something that was lacking again. And we see also that Congress has the expressed power to regulate interstate commerce. This clause on its own basically is the whole centerpiece of Congress's ability to mess around with our economy. So looking at a couple other things that the Constitution gives to the central government. And one of the biggest gifts to the central government can be found in Article 1, Section 8. Here, Congress is given what is known as the Necessary and Proper Clause. Now, this clause is the most stretched out clause in the entire Constitution, so much so that it's also known as the Elastic Clause, and this idea that Congress can do anything that is necessary and proper in order to execute the law. And so we look at that. Congress has been able to prove that many of their actions are necessary and proper, and therefore they've been able to stretch their power further than it probably was meant to go. Looking at other aspects of the Constitution that give us strong central government, and we see the Supremacy Clause, which we talked about in our last podcast, but again, the idea that when it comes down to it, sovereign federal government Constitution is above and more supreme than a state or local constitution. So again, we have the strong central government, but what provisions did we put in place to make sure that we didn't go over to Great Britain? What made us different than Great Britain? And there were a lot of things. And we're going to see these in our states' rights issue. So what parts of the Constitution gave states power? And so the first thing that we see is we see the Electoral College. We know that the president, that shows strong federal central government. But who actually elects the president? The president is chosen by a slate of electors known as the Electoral College. And while we'll go way more in depth in this in our presidential unit, the key thing here is that states choose who goes on their Electoral College. So yes, we have this strong federal position in the president, but each state picks who chooses the president. Clearly, that's showing that states need to have a role. What other things do we have? Well, we know that the Supremacy Clause says the Constitution is the supreme document. Well, recall, how does the Constitution get changed? And you remember that the Constitution cannot get changed without the states. The states play the biggest role in amending the Constitution. Remember that 3/4 of all states must vote to approve an amendment to the Constitution, or if the states don't want to listen to Congress and want to bypass Congress, the states themselves can vote for a constitutional convention. So that right there gives enormous power to the states. We also look at something that may be glanced over when we're looking at the Bill of Rights. We tend to look at the right to bear arms and cruel and unusual punishment because they seem exciting. But really the most important amendment of the first 10 might be the 10th Amendment. And that says that anything not expressly written in the Constitution is left up to the states to decide. You remember that the Constitution is one of the smallest founding documents in the history of the world, so obviously there are tons of things not in the Constitution, and therefore the states get to decide those. That's given the states the privilege to make decisions about the death penalty. How do they want education in their state? How do they want health care? What do they want to do about medical marijuana? How about same-sex marriage? So we see the 10th Amendment give incredible latitude to each of the states because they're allowed to do anything that is not forbidden in the Constitution. The last thing in the Constitution that gives states power is what is known the full faith and credit clause of the Constitution. We talked about it a little bit early on in Foundations, but what this full faith and credit clause says is that every state in the entire country must have the full faith and backing of the United States. So therefore, when you travel from Chicago to Milwaukee, you don't have to stop when you cross the border and have your driver's license exchanged. The same goes, my wife and I, who were married in Michigan, didn't need to get a new marriage license when we moved to Illinois, again, because every state has the full faith and credit. Again, enormous powers given to the states. The last thing that we see in the Constitution is known as the Privileges and Immunities Clause, and this says that states are forbidden from giving preferential treatment to people living in their states. So when you drive up to Wisconsin, they can't have an in-state price for a hamburger and an out-of-state price for something for people driving in from Illinois, because no person living in the state deserves certain privileges or immunities. So again, we have this Constitution that melds and combines the good aspects that we saw under centralized government with Great Britain, but it also takes the good things that we had from the Articles of Confederation. In our next lesson, we're going to have an exciting time looking at different types of cake. And that's not a joke, because I am the cake boss.